Hello everybody. This year we celebrate the centenary of a communication milestone, the pioneering radio broadcasting experiments conducted by Professor Robert Jack of the University of Otago in 1921. So in this episode of Talking Pictures, I thought we'd focus on this and some other key events in the history of communication in Otago. Developed in the 1830s and 1840s by Samuel Morse and others, the telegraph revolutionised long-distance communication. Telegraph came to New Zealand in the 1860s. Wires and insulators for establishing Dunedin's first telegraph line arrived by ship from Melbourne in June 1862. By August, all was set for the first telegraphed messages to be sent between Dunedin and Port Chalmers. This was the second telegraph line to begin operating in New Zealand, narrowly beaten into second place by the line between Christchurch and Lyttelton, which opened a few weeks earlier. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell was awarded the first US patent for the invention of a telephone. Just 2 years later, Charles Henry, a German-born electrical engineer who had settled in New Zealand in 1875, orchestrated New Zealand's first telephone conversation. The call was made between the Dunedin and Milton telegraph offices using equipment Charles Henry had built himself. In the 1890s, Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi began using radio waves to communicate wirelessly, and in 1901 famously sent wireless telegraphic signals across the Atlantic Ocean. Radiotelegraphy, the transmission of Morse code by radio waves, was soon also being experimented with here. During the Easter holidays in 1902, for example, Dunedin teenager James Passmore began building a wireless set after reading how to make one in a magazine article. 3 other Dunedin teenagers, Cyril Brandon, Rawson Stark, and Stanton Hicks, were soon also experimenting with wireless telegraphy, and on the 10th of September 1908 they staged a wireless demonstration. Messages were exchanged across the Otago harbour, between Stark's house in Anderson's Bay and Hicks's home in Ravensbourne. The messages included a special one for the Postmaster General and Parliament, which was subsequently relayed to Wellington via telephone and telegraph. There was also an exchange of messages between the Mayor of West Harbour at Ravensbourne and the Mayor of Dunedin at Anderson's Bay. After World War I, Robert Jack, Professor of Physics at the University of Otago, acquired wireless equipment to experiment with the transmission of people speaking, singing and playing music rather than Morse code. He achieved this within his laboratory in May 1921, and then sought permission from the government to broadcast further afield. With permission finally granted, Professor Jack made the first in a series of transmissions of voice and music on the 17th of November 1921. His broadcasts ceased about May 1922, but others soon began to gear up to take his place on the airwaves. 3 stations were established in Dunedin later that year, one by electrical engineer Norman Arundel, another by fellow electrical engineer Fred O'Neill, and one by the Otago Radio Association. The latter station still survives today as Radio Dunedin. Meanwhile, the distance over which amateur radio operators were sending and receiving Morse code messages was continuing to grow. In 1922, Timaru schoolboy Ralph Slade achieved what was thought to be impossible when he heard and logged radio signals from the United States. In July 1924, Frank Bell of Shag Valley Station had signals he had sent heard by an operator in Philadelphia. A few months later, on the 17th of October 1924, Ralph Slade, who was by then a Post and Telegraph Office cadet boarding with the Strong family in Dunedin, was also trying to make contact with the US when he was overheard as far away as England. The English operator tried to return Slade's call. Slade didn't hear the reply, but he did receive a telegram the next day confirming he'd indeed been heard on the opposite side of the world. Slade immediately contacted Frank Bell at Shag Valley Station to tell him the good news. Bell himself, who had a better antenna than Slade, then established contact with London student Cecil Goyder. Their hour-and-a-quarter exchange of Morse code on the 18th of October 1924 was the first round-the-world two-way radio contact. Dunedin's amateur radio operators gathered at the Strong residence to congratulate Ralph Slade on being the first New Zealander heard on the other side of the world when news of Bell's feat came through. They all left the party in a mad scramble to be the second New Zealander to make round-the-world two-way contact. Slade, who only needed to go as far as his bedroom, won the race to be second. He would also later be the first to make round-the-world two-way voice contact. The world was now closer together than it had ever been before. See you next time, and thanks for watching.